Welcome to the Productivity Show, a podcast where we believe you can get the important things done without sacrificing your health, your family, and things that matter to you. My name is Brooks from Asian Efficiency, where we help people become more productive at work and in life. And in this episode, I am super excited to welcome back Francesco D'Alessio from Keep Productive. Now, Francesco, I don't know if you know this, but you are a rare Triple Crown winner because this is the third time you've been on the Productivity Show. I know the other two times were the highlights of your life, but I'll try to keep it up going for this next time as well. I personally love Keep Productive. It's a great source for finding productivity tools and just learning what's going on in the space. Francesco, you do a really good job at kind of staying ahead of the curve, I would say, and we're going to talk about that for sure. So welcome back, Francesco. How's it going? What's going on?
Thank you, Brooks. So I'm excited to be back. When do I get my medal in the post? That's what I'm really.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to talk to Tan and get something sent over.
Yeah, I like it. I can wear it on the fourth one. No, I'm really excited to be back, and obviously it's been so interesting with productivity tools the last couple of years. So I'm always trying to keep on top of it, but it's such a ever evolving space, as you guys know so well from your work.
Right on. Well, since this is your third time, you know the deal. We always like to start each episode with what we call our top 3 resources. So these are 3 productivity things that are helping us or we're liking or we just want to share. But when we have a guest, of course, we would like you to share them if you have them. So Francesco, do you have 3 things you want to share with the audience today?
Yeah, of course. So obviously things change so rapidly. And I guess things that are sort of interesting more or on my sort of radar at the moment are, first off, a daily planner app called Routine that's really beautifully designed. It's seemingly got really generally like an ability with tasks, notes and calendar in one. And I think it's just really well designed as well. So that's on my radar as one of those daily planner apps. There's not as many daily planner apps, so it's good to see another one enter the space at the moment. The second experience I would say is, for me at least, the Remarkable tablet, because I think obviously one of your guys' goals with this podcast is really to help embrace that sort of family time and trying to disconnect from work as much as you can. And I find that tool, out of most of them, probably helps me to do that the best out of all of them. Just because when I use it, I'm taking myself away from a laptop or a phone and actually being able to write and creatively think. So that one always, for me, is ranked so highly. And the third one is a project management software that's interesting me at the moment. I'm really quite deep in the world of artificial intelligence and how it's going to affect productivity and work. And yeah, Catalog, it's a project management software that is doing something slightly differently in a space by basically you put in what your business is or what you want to build as part of your structure of your business, and you type it in like a media company or real estate firm or law firm, and it'll build a perfect workspace using artificial intelligence for you. So it sort of skips the necessary need to maybe create templates and things like that. So these sort of apps, I think, take the weight out of how we think about structuring our stuff, which is sometimes what we get too deeply involved in, the administration side of it. So they're sort of 3 hot things on my table at the moment in the world of productivity apps.
Oh yeah, that sounds really interesting. And Remarkable is funny because I don't have one myself, but people who have them love them. Like, I've never heard of anybody who tried it and then thought, it's not for me. It's like, if you find you have a need for something like the Remarkable, people just tend to really like it. So those are great suggestions.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you can find links to everything that we share in the show notes by going to theproductivityshow.com. So if you want to check out Routine, Remarkable, or Catalog, just head on over to theproductivityshow.com. Now, Francesco, I gave you a little bit of an introduction. I talked about Keep Productive a little bit, but for those who haven't listened to the other 2 episodes you've been on, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you've been up to lately. What are you doing these days?
Yeah, sure. So I mainly have a lot of attention on Keep Productive, which is basically we're like trying to be the place to find productivity tools, learn about them, And it's sort of, we're trying to like be the Tinder for productivity apps, where we try and hook you up with the right one. And it's like more like we hope that that match is made forever. Obviously, some matches are very short term, but our sort of mission is really to stick with you and help you collect the perfect application for you. So we recently launched something called Toolfinder, which helps you. It's basically like a Wikipedia for productivity tools. It's very basic at the moment, but it will be quite advanced in a couple of months as we add these quite major features to it, which will help you to find the ideal one for you, the ideal productivity app. And in the meantime, we launched an app ourselves called Bento, which was great fun. It's a Japanese-inspired focus application, which is still being featured by app. They love it at the moment, which is great. But people are finding a lot of benefit from this Bento methodology that we created alongside it, which is basically like trying to narrow down what you actually focus on, because we all get distracted by like a million things. This system is basically trying to keep you focused on 3 things. So yeah, it's been a very wild year, but we're just constantly on that mission to refine and help you find the perfect productivity tool, really.
So just out of curiosity, I have no experience with this whatsoever. Was launching an app, was it about as much work as you thought? Is it easier than you thought, or was it way more work than you thought?
For the developers, it was a big job, but pulling everything together, oh yeah, it definitely took more time and attention than I thought it would. But definitely, one thing it did for me in particular is sometimes when we're downloading apps and we're just sort of like trying them out, or, I guess just, exploring the productivity app space, we always forget that people have actually made these tools and it is difficult to make them. So what it's done for me, at least, is help me build a bit of empathy for the productivity app developers of the world. So every time I look at an app now since we've launched, I'm like, okay, it hasn't got that, but I'm also knowledgeable that that's going to take a lot of bit of time now. So I do feel more empathy for everyone that's building apps, which is nice.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's a personal rule I have, is I try not to. I generally don't say that I think an app or a tool or whatever is bad. It's just maybe not for me, but just because it's not for me doesn't necessarily mean that it's good, not good or bad or anything, because every tool solves a problem, so it's just a matter of whether the tool solves your problem or not. That's the main thing.
That's it. Yeah 100%.
I'm so glad you mentioned Toolfinder, because that's kind of my inspiration for having you on, because I was checking it out and it's a pretty, I know you said it's going to be growing lately, but it's a pretty comprehensive already resource. I was on there and I was looking at, say, email apps, and the email app that I personally use, Spark, was there, and I was looking through it, and there's a lot of content about what it does, who it's for, all the tips and stuff like that. And I was like, yep, if you wanted to know about Spark, this pretty much answers it. So what is it that made you go, say, from the YouTube videos to having something like Toolfinder? Like, what was the inspiration for it? Who do you think it's for? And maybe you can just talk us through a little bit about more what it does. I know you said it's the Wikipedia for apps versus maybe the Tinder for apps, but you can talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, of course. It's I think the idea behind it is, I think like a lot of the, like if somebody comes to find a YouTube video, you tend to get a very sort of transactional experience. But with Toolfinder, it's sort of like, at least my brain put into Toolfinder and how I sort of connect apps up together. It's sort of like a way to save me time more than it is a way to save. It saves people time, obviously, using it, but I think it's like going to be the heart of how to find a tool. So this is very much the version 1 of it. We're going to be adding news, guides, courses, coaching, things like that to it. Everything around productivity. And then we're going to be adding a new feature soon that basically, it's more of like an interactive experience to finding a productivity app in a very different way. I won't give up too much away, but it's quite
Sure.
unique in the space. But it's just gonna like sort of narrow down the usage and finding the perfect one. Because obviously, like, it's sort of like it is a Wikipedia, and if you're going around Wikipedia, you can just click links and find stuff. But it's almost like being able to just funnel you and narrow you down into what one is most suitable for you. So I'm very excited and eager to keep building it, really.
Yeah, I think, and you kind of nailed down on it. The challenge with productivity apps, I guess any type of app, but especially productivity apps, is there's just so many of them out there. And sometimes we can kind of get into the weeds of, like, for example, sometimes we've been talking to somebody and they maybe have some sort of pretty, I wouldn't say basic, but let's just say foundational productivity challenge with time management or something. And they're asking questions about integrations in BusyCal and getting it, set up a certain way. It's like, the BusyCal is a great app. I like it a lot, but I don't think getting bogged down in BusyCal integrations at this point is really the thing to be focusing on. It's a little more foundational. So, A, what do you think about that? And B, if somebody is approaching this need, they feel like they need a productivity app, like, how do you think they should approach that versus just seeing an app and trying it?
Yeah, no, you're right. It is explained as foundational because it requires, I think it requires so much thought and process than just sort of looking at the next shiny one and sort of moving forward. So the way that I typically recommend it is like a 3-part process. I don't think I would talk about all of the parts of the process, but the first part, which is research, is so important. And I think what people tend to a bit trapped in is that thinking that they're going to stay the same person than they are in 6 months' time. So, for example, if somebody came to me that was a student and they were looking for a to-do list application and they had low budget and potentially looking to work in, I don't know, sales after they finish university or college, well, I would try and recommend them something that they'd try be using in 3 to 5 years' time. Just because if you think of it like that, then it does help you to choose something that you're going to grow and adapt and optimize into versus something you're going to use for 6 months and then potentially switch over to something more robust. So I try and approach it like that. So looking at small to big things that are going to be happening to you, and that can be anything from like career changes being quite large, obviously, to lifestyle changes, to software and access to device changes. It's important to look ahead as well as to look at the snapshot in time that you've got. But going back to your point, it's so important that you have a good foundation first. And the best way to do that is look at, okay, what system do I typically use? And what app can work well with this system? So, for example, if you're heavily into getting things done, or heavily into the Kanban methodology, if you're heavily into the Pomodoro timer methodology, things that you may have, or you've got a concoction, or all of them, which is going to be really flexible for that and retain good productive frameworks versus just something that's nice and fluffy and that looks good. You need to look whether it's so research is so important.
I love that concept of looking ahead when you're choosing a productivity tool, because I think that can really help avoid one of the big challenges with productivity tools, which is shiny object syndrome, right? And if you are starting maybe more simply than you should, or at least if you can see yourself going a certain direction, but you just want to start for where you are now, like you said, then it won't be long until you hit some sort of window and then you start looking around. And there's such there's such huge switching costs for jumping, even like task managers and stuff like that, right? If you make a task manager part of your workflow, part of your life, and then 6 months later you're changing to something else, that's a pretty big productivity hit.
Yeah.
How do you handle it when somebody maybe comes to you, maybe it's like a question through YouTube or Toolfinder or whatever, and you do an awesome video about some great, like, I don't know, Sunsama or something like that. And you're like, man, this tool is great. I really, really like it. And they're on another tool. What do you think the point is that it makes sense to jump over to this other tool, right?
Yeah.
Just like you said, just because something looks great. And I'm saying this as somebody who has been trialing Sunsama for a couple of weeks and really, really like it. But what do you think that point is where it does make sense to jump over or versus like stick with what you're using?
It's always a tough question because you want to press, but you don't want to press too much because everyone has their own decisions and choices around it, which is totally fine. The way that I see it, as you explained now, obviously it's quite detrimental to your productivity to move base all the time. So I would normally explain it as, if you're moving Notes app, it's going to be like moving house. If you're moving Tasks app, it's going to be like moving car. If you move, Calendar app, it's going to be like moving shoes, because shoes are a lot easier to move around, and so are calendar apps normally. And when you move house, is that upheaval of, effort, time, and money as well. So it's important to really make a confident decision on it. So the first bit of the process that I typically recommend is research. So obviously going through research around the tool before you even start using it. Then if you're actually, say if you were using Todoist or TickTick and you were like, okay, Sunsama is my option, I'm considering this. It's also looking at things like budget before you move on. It's going, this is going to be more expensive, but does it correlate to the expenditure that I'm, will it make me more coordinated to earn more money, to pay for the tool, etc., etc. But once you're out of that research phase and you're confident that this is the tool for you, the second phase is a trial phase. So what I normally recommend is a trial of 90 days. The main reason behind that is because 3 months is a good window of time to actually understand that this tool is going to be for you. It develops a habit with the tool. And I normally call this the forced trial. So you have to do 90 days. And the main reason I say ideally it's a forced trial is because during those 90 days, you want to make sure that you've got the right tool, because you're forcibly going to reach 90 days. And that's why if you haven't got the right tool, it's bad. So make sure the research is right before you do the forced 90-day trial, because then you realize you're committing to something. You're like, oh God, I don't want to be 45 days in and find out this is wrong. But if you do come out of that 90-day trial and you're going, this still isn't right for me, then it's going back to stage 1 again. But if it is right for you, it's going to stage 3, which is optimize. So obviously during that 90 days, it's getting used to the tool. It's just working out how it works. But after those 90 days, you feel you're strong with it, you feel you're confident with it, you know what you're doing, then it's about optimizing it and trying to stay with that tool for as long as humanly possible. So 3 years, I would say 2 to 3 years is a good window period for being with a productivity app, but ideally 5 years, because I feel like that's a nice window of time. But we both know that productivity apps are rapidly developing with AI and software changes at the moment. So it's also difficult to keep that same philosophy, because they're going to look rapidly different. So it's like, if one does something, yeah.
It's true. I mean, we're going to get into this in a bit, but I think we're on a precipice of so many changes with productivity tools that I guess in a way, this is kind of a weird time to be having this particular conversation because it might come that we all want to change pretty soon.
Oh,
But
yeah, definitely.
I really like your 90-day forced trial, as you call it. I hadn't really thought of it that way because that's the thing with productivity tools, right? Is when you start using a new tool, no matter what, you're going to be slow at it. You're going to, because you haven't made it part of your rhythm yet. You haven't learned all the little tricks and shortcuts. And so if you're just evaluating it for a week, you're never going to get to that point where you are productive, quote unquote, productive with it because you're still in that learning phase. So you actually can't make an appropriate evaluation in just a week or two. You do kind of have to give it longer to know if it will have a big impact. So yeah, that 90-day rule, that's pretty great.
Yeah, I don't know where I got it from. I think it was actually from a fitness thing, because sometimes when you buy like a new piece of fitness equipment just to get you working, just to get you focused in doing fitness, it's like a really common thing. Like you'll buy like a really expensive gym mat just to go and do it in the gym. But there was something that said like bring it back to its core, like spend 90 days with it, doing it, getting the habit in place before you then, and then after the 90 days, purchase the item so that you're like committed and you've got a habit and a routine. And I sort of stole it from that a little bit, that sort of theology.
Hey, nothing wrong with stealing. Now, Toolfinder, I don't know where I heard or read this. Maybe it was on Twitter or something. I read that it was built on Notion. Is that true? Because usually something like that, you would hire a programmer and build you some custom coded system or something.
Yeah.
Is it true that it's built on Notion?
Yeah. So it was a very weird story because I had the concept of doing a site like this, and I was just getting WordPress as my options and quite expensive costs for it. And obviously, as someone with no coding skills, I then spoke initially to Chris Dancy, who was like, "Oh, you can do it with Pori and Airtable," and I sort of like didn't like the look of it. And I didn't like the feel of it because I'm not somebody who uses Airtable a lot. And then I found Super and Notion, and honestly, it probably took me about 2 full weeks to create the site and pretty much get it ready. And then it's mad how I can because I know Notion so well, I can just build tools from databases from it and just keep launching features. So it's really crazy how you can build stuff now in productivity tools. So it's been good fun, good lots of learning, but a pleasure to use those sort of softwares.
It's actually unbelievable if you think about it that one could just whip something like I guess if you wouldn't do it coming cold from Notion, but if you're already pretty familiar with it, it's actually pretty unbelievable that somebody could just whip something like that up in a couple, at least the first version in a couple of weeks just to get it working. That's actually kind of remarkable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What else are you using? Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't. I've lost trail of thought anyway. Go on,
No, sorry about that. My bad. Now, our Notion relationship goes way back since you created a Notion course for us a long time ago. So thank you very much. That was great. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your Notion use these days. What are you other than this, what are you using it for these?
I primarily use it for work. So we manage everything for the team in there. But what's nice now is it's sort of like our CRM for tools as well. So when we're planning our content calendar, it links in with Toolfinder as well. So we're able to like constantly keep tools linked to our content calendar, which is crazy because that's all we talk about. So it's like, and it's mad how many tools there are to be able to coordinate the content calendar. So it's also like a dream to have Toolfinder alongside it. But yeah, we use it pretty much anything you think of, like holiday, putting petrol amounts in, organizing meetings and stuff like that. It's really been a dream for that.
Yeah, it's funny. My son is in grade 12. I don't know what the equivalent in the UK is, but the final year of high school. And so he's getting organized to, first of all, organize his life, and then university applications, all that stuff. And so first of all, he showed me this book he bought. He's like, Dad, this book's great. It's called Atomic Habits. Have you heard of it? I'm like, yes, I've heard of it. And then he comes downstairs and he goes, oh, I really want to get my life organized. So I started using this new app called Notion. Have you heard of it? I'm like, when your kids start coming down telling you about Notion, that's when you know it's starting to hit the mainstream.
Yeah, and you were like, yeah, I know about that for ages, Don't lecture me. That's class.
It's so funny too. Like, I can try and show him all the stuff and he has no interest, but if he hears about it from YouTube or TikTok, then all of a sudden it's the most brilliant thing ever. But coming from me, not so much.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Ahead of the curve though.
That's right. Let's geek out on some other productivity app stuff that's kind of been coming. We talked about AI, and I do want to talk about that in a bit, but I want to get your thoughts about the Canvas feature of Obsidian. So I know you've talked about Obsidian a lot. It's all over Toolfinder, obviously, but Obsidian and Canvas seems like at least to me, it seems like a pretty major change, because Obsidian was always very texty and markdowny, and the geek in me loves it, of course, but I think some people prefer things a little more visual. What do you think of the Canvas feature? Do you think it's just going to be a niche thing, or do you think it's kind of as major as I think it might end up being?
No, I think I'm really impressed with Obsidian. I think I called it like feature of the year just because how, like you said, Obsidian is quite static in its nature, and then you've just introduced a very functional tool that is like post-it notes, but sort of on drugs. It's brilliant, and it's so good because as a note-taking application, it's all about thinking and being able to creatively think, and like being able to now see all your notes like laid out on a canvas is incredible. So I'm also mind blown that Obsidian launched it, but also really impressed. And it's definitely nudged a few of the other PKM tools to do the same. Like I think Logseek followed suit. I'm almost certain they had that in development at the time, but it's so good to see this sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm mightily impressed. But there are so many little sort of other note-taking applications that are coming around this space that are quite interesting, especially like these sort of object-based ones that are sort of designed around objects before anything else, which I think plays really into AI's hands for the future. But yeah, it's great news from Obsidian. I still can't believe they launched it.
Yeah, I think that's another thing. Speaking of going more mainstream, I think stuff like that is going to make it more mainstream than just those of us who like writing in Markdown and stuff like that. Yeah. Even though I love Markdown, don't get me wrong, but it's not for everybody. So yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
You mentioned AI, so we might as well get into it. I've learned, not to pump up your tires, but I've learned a lot from you about stuff going on in the AI industry. I know you are like all over it big time. I'm kind of an interesting observer, but you're diving right in. So maybe you can talk about where you see some of these AI changes are coming, because there's new apps, of course, but also apps like Todoist and Notion, like we just talked about, are adding AI stuff. What do you think is going to happen with AI and productivity? Where do you see all this going?
Yeah, it's such a big question, but I think that I think AI is going to kill productivity apps as we see them. I think mainly because if you think about how a productivity app it's set up right now, is it relies a lot on the manual administration of your work, whether that's in a task app, organizing your to-dos, or a notes app, foldering your notebooks and notes. And in a way, although there's an output, you see all your tasks organized, ready for the day, and maybe the system does a few small things for you. That is the productivity element, because it's organizing yourself. It's being productive. So if you take an AI system in the future that does anything that takes you time and effort to put together, whether that's organizing your task list for the day, organizing your notes, filing your meetings, rearranging your meetings, things like that, then it's not really a productivity app anymore. It's not administrating your life. It's doing it for you. So there's no administration for you to do. So it essentially starts becoming a work app. And then you can potentially not just have your productivity app, it connects with other services that you're using. So if you add a task of, write Sarah an email about next week's appointment, it starts doing things for you. So that's when it becomes a work apps and not a productivity apps, because you actually start to get work done in it versus administrating and organizing yourself. So I think we're going to see, weirdly, a big shift in what we define to be a productivity app, which is going to be great for the space, because to be honest, I think it's long overdue, because I would say the hardcore productivity app fans out there, I'd say myself included, we all sort of get a sense of mindfulness from organizing our productivity spaces. It's sort of like our crutch in a way, because we look at other people in the society, and largely you're in sort of the 10 to 15% of people who organize their own lives and use software to do that. So you sort of get a little bit of like, oh, I'm quite organized, I'm productive, I organize myself and I don't miss a beat. But once that's on scale and people are using it in day-to-day lives, like whether that's somebody who's not somebody who's a productivity nerd, but types in their stuff into Apple reminders and it combines it with health data to project the best possible structure to your day based on your energy levels, then everyone becomes a productivity app fan. But then obviously they're not called productivity apps anymore.
Sure.
So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out on scale. And I think it's more like how creative it can get and how willing people are to share their information to systems like artificial intelligence will be quite interesting for sure. Scary.
Yeah, I was even thinking about it. Yeah, yeah, kind of. I was even thinking about it when you were talking about doing your top 3 resources, when you were talking about catalog and how, you just say what you want to do and then it kind of creates the whole structure for you. And when you were saying that, I was just thinking about how much busy work there is in productivity apps, as we call them, right? You got to create the project. You got to maybe put it in a folder. You've got to create the tasks. You got to set the date, maybe set flags, set tags and stuff like that. Maybe you want to color code things. You want to move them around. At the end of the day, you want to like push it forward to the next day. Like there's so much busy work that comes with productivity apps. And you're right. Like those of us who are in this space, it's kind of second nature to us. Like somebody who uses OmniFocus, for example, I'm an OmniFocus user, and if they're trying to kind of like sell it to somebody, they'll be like, oh yeah, look at all this stuff. You can set these custom perspectives and stuff like that. And, for us, we love it, but you show somebody and they can't hit Command Q fast enough, right? They're like, yeah. I don't want to have to do any of this stuff, right? I just want, like you said, I just want to do the things that I needed to do. And I think you're right. I think AI is probably going to help us get there.
Yeah, it's definitely going to shake things up. I think one of the things that I would say in about 3 years' time, 40% of what we do now will be done for us in our work days. And it's whether That's everything, administrating things, doing small research tasks, small errands for us across the day. And it's really like, okay, we've drawn our capacity back 40%. So we've got, potentially 40% extra time. I think it's that question of, will we use that extra 40% of time or effort to recharge our batteries and help the 60% of time be really creative and effective? Or do we overload ourselves and we do more because of it? So I think that's going to be an interesting shift to whether people do more or whether people do stuff better. So that's going to be society's change in productivity, I think, at least.
Right. It's like how dishwashers and washing machines were supposed to make us all have all this free time that then we can then have leisure time, but didn't quite work out that way. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I think like a lot of work that you do will be decision making and creative, which will be nice work because it's so much more fulfilling when you are like, at least from people I've spoken to, when they do deep work, when they're actually moving the needle on a project or creating something really exciting or building something from scratch, that's the work that is really amazing. And if you can get systems that take away all the fluff and, stuff that's sort of a bit just fills up time, like you said, busy work, then that can unlock so much more creativity for people because they're not bogged down by like, oh God, I've got to email this person, got to email that person, got to, organize my files, I've got to, go and do this small research errand. It just unblocks them, which is beautiful, really. We'll see.
Absolutely. Yeah. Are there any other AI-powered apps that you're getting excited about? You mentioned Catalog. Any other apps you're either using or you kind of see coming that have caught your attention?
Not really at the moment. It seems like I would say the two that sort of interest in me are like how people are going to do it when it comes to structural AI versus generative AI. Because at the moment it's like, okay, plug it into a note-taking application, let it spew research or beneficial stuff like that, which is good. Don't get me wrong. But it's more like, how is it going to organize your workspace designed around this? Or how is it going to reschedule your tasks, based on your blip in energy? That's what excites me much more. Yeah. But I think we'll probably face a dilemma where AI will make us jump about apps for a while. Like we'll be like, oh, okay, this one is better because it's got this AI. This one's got, and we'll just probably do that for about a year, and then we'll go, okay, let's sit down seriously and go, which one's going to be most effective for us? Or it's going to go the other way, where AI is going to make it so easy to add stuff in and import that then changing apps is going to become a weekly thing, which I hope doesn't happen, but it could well do. We'll see.
Yeah, Tan and I were talking about this the other day, how right now AI tools, they still rely on us telling them to do something. Yeah. Where I think like you said, the gold is when we don't have to tell them what to do. It just kind of is going along in the background and supposedly making things better for us. So like you say, We'll see.
Yeah, all in good
All right,
time.
we talked, Yeah. We talked about Obsidian Canvas, which is an exciting kind of new feature of an exciting app. I want to kind of go the other direction, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, because you were all over Evernote for a long time. I know you were an old school Evernote user. Tan and I were old school Evernote users. I know you've had a lot of great videos about Evernote over the years. What do you think, for those listening who aren't aware, Evernote was recently purchased by a company called Bending Spoons, which was a surprising to me anyway, small transaction. What do you think about the whole thing, Francesco? Do you think if somebody's currently an Evernote user, they should jump, or what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, it's a tough one because you never know what a company's going to do with a piece of software. But from the statement from their CEO Luca Ferrari, it sounds very promising that they're not going to just shut it down, which is good. They're committed to sort of evolving it. And from what I've heard, Bending Spoon's reputation in the mobile development space is probably one of the best in the mobile development space. I think a couple of weeks ago, they had Tim Cook come around. They've won multiple Apple awards. They also are developing AI in their apps pretty efficiently. So I think what's probably going to happen is in the next sort of year, Evernote are going to release the most amazing note-taking app for mobile. And it's probably just going to blow everyone out of the water. And in what I mean is it's going to be like the most native, most clean experience you'll find in note-taking. I think that will make a lot of people who are there happy, and it'll probably make a lot of people want to jump over to it. But I think once you combine Evernote with artificial intelligence, I think that's when it gets really exciting. Mainly because Evernote's got a homepage. Notion doesn't have a homepage, really. And I think that's a really good thing to have. It's probably a small ad for Notion or a big ad, but I feel like that's a great opportunity for them to build out from the artificial intelligence stuff. And you can think about that if you open your Evernote. You know, there might be your flight tickets with your meetings that are coming up on the flight, all organized, and, you know, it's sending files to other people. But I definitely think they're going to have a good leapfrog in the market. But also, you know, they're going to hopefully build a solid application that not, you know, like our hardcore communities, yes, might use, but also the everyday folk that are looking for a good note-taking experience outside of Apple Notes and Google Keep. So yeah, it's promising for sure. I don't think it's going to be a bad thing. Hopefully not.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to happen. And you're right, we're such a mobile first, even though the old school Evernote users, you know, maybe had our import folders set up on the computer and all that sort of stuff. But I think the world is going for sure mobile first. So I think if they can nail a really, really solid mobile experience, I think they're going to be in pretty good shape. Totally agree.
Definitely, yeah.
All right, Francesco, you are honestly living... I'm asking you this question because really you're living the dream, because I saw one of your YouTube videos where you were giving a tour of a new garden office you had built. So I'm pretty sure that last time you were on the podcast, you were recording from like a spare bedroom where the crib was there and stuff like that. But now you've had this whole garden office built and you gave a tour of it, and we'll link to the tour video in the show notes. So basically this is for me because I want to just bask in your experience. But maybe you could talk us through like how that whole process went, what benefits you found from having your own space, and if somebody was thinking of building something like this, kind of maybe some lessons learned, things you wish you knew going into it, and maybe you could just share some of your experience of that.
Yeah, sure. So I've been remote working probably since 2013, 14. Something like even during university, like when I worked for companies, it was always from my sort of bedroom. So I've been doing it for so long, and I've always wanted somewhere where I can work, but most importantly, somewhere where I can film, so I don't have to set up rigs and things like that, and everything's just sort of plug and play. So I had a garden office built about a year ago, roughly now, and it's quite a small. It's a big office for me, but small from some of the other ones I built. It's about 2.5 meters wide, 4 meters long. And it's just brilliant. Like, I think having the separation from work to be able to just, walk away from work and then be able to switch off at home is so nice. And it's in the garden as well. So when the blinds are open, you can see, all the wildlife running around the garden, cats and squirrels and everything. So it's really lovely for that. But I think I still go to coffee shops quite a lot, but I think it's just really, really nice to have a central place to work and focus and film videos. I also got a walking under desk treadmill as well, probably about a couple of months ago. And it's insane. Like, I don't do it for meetings because I look really weird, but you end up getting a good workout. You end up hitting a fair amount of steps during it, which is really nice. But to be honest, I feel really blessed when I'm in here, because it's like sort of like 10 years of doing this. It's like it's paid off a bit in terms of having my own space to work in, which I've always wanted. So I really can't complain, which is nice.
You mentioned you go to coffee shops sometimes. Is that just because you want some context switching, like just kind of like a change in focus, or what's kind of like the impetus behind switching up like that?
I really like that sort of context switching. Like, I do a lot of writing in coffee shops or like focused work, and then I use the office for filming, administration, planning, but also like planning in coffee shops. I think it's just getting out so I could just stay in here all day, and I also like, I think because I don't have I have Steve, who's our editor, but we only see each other every 2 weeks. I think having some sort of community is important when you're remote working. I think that's why a lot of people struggle with remote work. So going to a coffee shop, seeing, the old people and the baristas and the people that come in, I just love it, because it's like their little sort of family community. So that's a big thing for me.
Awesome. So if somebody was thinking of building a garden office or backyard office or whatever you call it where you live, it sounds like you would recommend it.
Oh yeah. But it's one of those things that it's like, it's a luxury. You know what I mean? It's very lucky it's sort of taken me a while to get to the stage where I can get it, if that makes sense. But yeah, definitely a blessing for sure.
Similar to what I asked you about the app, was it, I'm assuming you weren't sitting there like hammering it, but was it the whole process? Was it easier than you thought, about what you thought? Was it harder than you thought? How did the whole process go?
Easy, because I didn't build it, which is so good. I got somebody else with smarter minds to do that. The whole process was fairly easy. I think just getting the groundworks was the difficult thing. But once they came and installed it, it only took a week to install. And it actually, the thing that I found most difficult is actually the interior design of it, which I've changed up about 5 times. But I'm finally getting to where I want it to be now. But it's one of those things that is like, it takes a specific set of skills to get a garden office ready. But once they did it, it was very, very synced. Really nice.
Nice. All right, Francesco, this was really great. I really learned a lot about this AI stuff coming and that type of thing. We always like to end each podcast with an action item, like something that we want people to take away after listening to this episode. So if you were to recommend people listening to this do one thing, what would it be? What do you want people to do?
Go to bed. Get more time in bed if you can. That's my tip. Just any extra time sleeping. It's going to help.
Yeah, spoken like a parent.
It really does.
Yeah.
With productivity.
Yeah.
Like the days that I overwork myself, you always like get into that way. Like, I'm gonna do like an hour before bed, and then the days that you do have like 3 nights that are consistently good, the amount of productivity and better decision making you have is incredible. Like, it's just so underrated. I forget about it all the time. Should just do it more often.
Yeah, sleep and energy is definitely the silent killer of productivity. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Francesco. If somebody wants to learn more about you, wants to check out Toolfinder, where's the best place for people to go online?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Asian efficiency, so thank you for having me on. Yes, if people want to find Toolfinder, they can go to Toolfinder.xyz, and you can find out more on Keep Productive as well, which you can type into YouTube, and you can find the perfect productivity app. So, but do keep an eye on Toolfinder because we will release something fun in the next month. So yeah, stay tuned.
All right. So we will link to all of that, like I said before, in the productivityshow.com, or you can just swipe in your podcast player and the links will be right there. So thanks so much, Francesco. And thanks everybody for listening. We will see you next Productive Monday.